What is the most disrespectful thing you've seen at a memorial funeral? My aunt arriving late to the removal and requesting the coffin to be reopened, to see my mom, because she couldn't be arsed to turn up in time, while her two sisters who lived 4 hours away had no issues with time. Buddy of mine was a serviceman, he got killed in action. The media and the paps tried to force a way into the cathedral where the service was held. There was a strict no cameras rule inside by family request. They didn't care, they just wanted a great shot. They then followed us to the crematorium where the family and friends service was held. That's when things got ugly. They got aggressive about trying to get pictures of the grieving mother and sisters. A few of my mates lost it. A camera guy got a pretty good kicking, he deserved it. My mom's boyfriend died recently. He was an atheist, but the rest of his family are fundamental Baptists. His brother stood up to give the eulogy and said, "I fully believe in my heart, Mom's boyfriend is now in hell." This was on top of all the gospel music, sermon, etc. at the memorial. I went to a funeral like this. The deceased had committed suicide and the priest essentially used the service as an opportunity to tell people about what happened if you killed yourself, that you'd go to hell. I felt so sorry for the man's wife. I can see St. Peter at the pearly gates checking people in. SP. Cause of death? Dead person number 1, cancer. SP. You may enter heaven. SP. Cause of death? DP number 2, heart disease. SP. You may enter heaven. SP. Cause of death? DP number 3, untreated mental illness. SP. What's that? DP number 3. I suffered from severe depression all my life and never got the help I needed. Yesterday, I had enough and couldn't see any way it was going to get better, so I took my own life. SP. Burn in hell. This wasn't at the funeral, but I had a cousin do the following during the weekend of my grandfather's funeral. 1. Went into his house, put sticky notes on all the things she and her husband wanted. 2. Asked her mom and uncles to give her the house, more than once. 3. Spent a ton of time trying to sell her Etsy shit, crappily crocheted scarves and mittens, to all the relatives who were in town for the funeral. 4. Showed up an hour late to the lunch after the memorial service and then acted pissed that nobody had saved seats for her and her husband. 5. At the memorial lunch, she had volunteered to give a small talk about our grandfather. I wasn't close with him, but it was a super offensive speech and she clearly hadn't prepared. She spent the whole time before and after talking about how her speech was really good because she had done debate in high school. She graduated high school probably 25 years ago. So yeah, awkward weekend. When my great-grandmother died, my great-uncle Sidney, her son, didn't turn up to the funeral. The rest of the family came back to the house to find it completely stripped by workers from his auction house. No member of the family ever saw him again. My mom showing up to my dad's funeral. They got divorced when I was in my early 20s after the kind of bad marriage where you tell yourself that you're staying together for the kids, but really you're just too bitter to make the first move to end it. When they split up, it was a profound fucking relief for all parties concerned. My mom bought a new house and reinvented herself, and Dad kept the old place and hit the bottle and cigarettes more than usual. Fast forward 10 years, during which he's kept quiet about my mom and during which my mom has done nothing but trash him at every opportunity. At first I figured that she was keen to establish that she was the wrong party and shift blame for the divorce onto him, but after a few years it became something more gleefully pathological. Minor things became forums for digging at him. She told me with a straight face that there were only 4 teaspoons in the kitchen drawer because she'd left half of the cutlery at his house, because she was fair and equitable. Unlike him, who said that one thing back in 1979 that she'd never forget. Do you remember? It was when we were on vacation and he refused to look at the map and… well, you probably get the idea. It had been a decade. We were way past the point of just moving on. Dad got sick and got shitty medical advice. His doctor told him he had sciatica and should take a couple of months off of work, ignoring the clubbed fingers, reduced lung function, confusion and weight loss that typically comes with untreated small cell lung cancer that's metastasized to bone, colon, liver and brain. By the time my sister and I got involved, the ship was sinking fast, and after a few more months of utter misery he filled a glass with scotch, put the game on the TV, called my aunt and asked her to come over and help him with dinner that evening, and then took his entire month's supply of morphine in one sitting. It probably seemed like the best option, and I really can't fault him on that one at all. He and I had talked funerals on the grounds that the writing was on the wall, and there would be no miracle cures for the assorted stage 4 cancers that were competing for the honor of carrying him off. He wasn't a particularly religious guy, but he quite enjoyed church and the rituals and observances that came with it. He had hymns he wanted sung, Bible passages he wanted quoted, and so on, but he also had one specific request. He didn't want my mom to be there. She'd been nothing but unpleasant to his family since the divorce, and he didn't want any trouble at the funeral. He didn't want to ask her himself. Their limited contact since his diagnosis had been about the dispersal of some property, and her comment on finding out that he had weeks to live was good. After he did the smart thing, took himself out of his misery, I went and talked to her, told her that Dad had this request that he'd wanted me to deliver to her, and that I'd appreciate it as a favor if she'd honor that request. She bridled in the idea but eventually came round. We'd go get dinner after the funeral, I told her. I'd cook that pasta that she liked. I had some pictures of her newborn grandson that she hadn't seen. It'd be fun. So it was a surprise when she showed up in a huge red hat and red dress at the funeral at 10 o'clock the following morning, all smiles and laughter and making herself the center of attention. I took her aside, reminded her that we had a deal, and she laughed and said that this was a public place and that she had every right to be there, that he couldn't tell her what to do anymore, and that his family had no choice to put up with it, and so on and so forth. She sat in the front row and spent the entire time grinning like she just won some kind of fucking medal. She sang as loud as she could and sneered at every solemn moment. There's no denouement worth writing about. Nobody called her on it or made a scene, nobody lost their composure. She did her thing and we did ours, and when the funeral was over we went to his favorite bar and pretended that we were all so incredibly surprised that a 58-year-old alcoholic who ate crap, never exercised, and smoked 2 packs a day for 40 years could end up ultimately reaping what he'd sown. Mom wanted to come with us, but she'd come to the funeral by cab, and for one mysterious reason or another nobody was able to give her a ride. We drank and made small talk, and by 9 o'clock that night I was in another city eating Indian food with my friend who'd also just lost his dad, and the next morning I was on a 10-hour plane flight home to my wife and kid. Truth be told, I never particularly liked my dad. I didn't feel anything when died, no loss, no sadness. He wasn't a bad guy, but he was a terrible parent who didn't understand kids, and really had no interest in making an effort that way. I always understood that it wasn't his fault, and it wasn't malice, he just didn't have the parental instinct in him. He was just a guy that we lived with who liked to drink and smoke and watch football and keep himself to himself, like a much older roommate. He was a fixture in my early life, and then he was gone, and it was odd. He didn't care about me and I didn't care about him, but I didn't hate him. But now I hate my mom. My wife died in May of this year. She had battled stage 4 breast cancer for 3 years, and I had given up a 6-figure job to stay home and care for her. My wife grew up in California and we lived in Minnesota, so her family was not around and didn't see how hard she was fighting. I attended every appointment, changed wound dressings for a wound vac. I hope I never have to do that again, and administered medicine. In that process we went through all of our savings, retirement, and had to declare bankruptcy. I don't say that for sympathy or to get kudos. She was worth every minute, every dollar, every sacrifice. My wife was from California and we lived in Minnesota, and when she passed it was her wish to have services in both states. At my wife's funeral in California, I was meeting with the priest immediately before the service, and I then walk out to the front of the church to take my seat. I get there only to find that my wife's parents and family did not keep a space to sit for me and my parents in the front, family, pew. In fact, they were shocked that I wanted to sit in the family section at all. I didn't say a word and sat across the aisle in our own pew, also in the front. Fun day. They clearly don't know the meaning of family. Your wife was blessed to have spent her life with you. I am sorry for your loss. My stepfather was married to my mum for 18 years. At his funeral, his ex-wife pushed my mum back into her seat so she could follow his coffin out of the church. Traditionally, the widow does this. As if that wasn't bad enough, when the coffin was being lowered into the grave, it had been raining all morning, so the graveside was just mud. She, the ex-wife, was kneeling in the mud wailing, loudly, the whole time. She was wearing what I can only describe as a long black satin nightdress. It was embarrassing and horrifying at the same time. My poor mother a mess the whole time. My stepfather had drowned, so it was all very sudden, and just stood there not knowing what to do. I was at the funeral of a friend who had died due to a heroin OD. His heroin dealer showed up to the service. Half of us were pissed, and the other half was buying from him and shooting in the parking lot bathroom of the wake. Fucking awful, mate. Selfie with the body. That is beyond belief. What kind of person thinks that's a good idea? Unfortunately, plenty of people do. My friend's ex showed up at a mutual friend's service and brought her large dog to the graveside service at Cave Hill. It pissed on the coffin. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.